knowing what you know, what do you think when you sit back and watch all the hand-wringing and debate about someone who's probably the most divisive, both on the field and off the field, quarterback prospect ever, in someone like Tim Tebow?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't draft him in the first round. So, right away, if he's still around, he seems like a good kid. His mechanics apparently aren't all that good, but maybe he's too super coachable. I don't know. I mean, I'm just so unexcited by the kind of search for the Holy Grail in quarterbacks that I'm quite happy to take someone who has a mediocre tag to him. Maybe it means he tries harder. I don't know. I'd be much more, if I was a general manager, I would spend much more of my time building good offensive lines, and more importantly, getting, to me, the evidence that a really great receiver transforms the quarterback is far more compelling than the other way around. Everywhere that Randy Moss goes, all of a sudden everyone turns into an all-star. Same with Terrell Owens. Everyone magically has their best season when they're complaining about Terrell, right? So that, what does that tell you? If Terrell had stayed at Philadelphia, what's his name would be a lock for the Hall of Fame. I mean, he probably would go anywhere.
Sure. So you brought up the difficulties of predicting scientific research and things. So is your talk an indictment on all professional sports drafts, or is it really just the NFL draft?
Well, no, remember, I'm very specifically talking about quarterbacks. Okay. So, and I do think, like, if you're looking for rebounders or patience with the plate, or there are specific skill sets, and I'm happy to, like I said, happy to entertain the notion that maybe offensive linemen or something that is reasonably predictable. But whenever you have these situations where you have major treatment effects, you need to be wary. Like, I'm much more interested in how good my coaches are than how good my players are, because I'm just much more taken with the power of treatment effects. The person who got Bill Walsh as their coach at a time when he's able to kind of radically reimagine the game, the quality of the players becomes really secondary. Because, I really, really do believe, for example, that Steve Young, in another context, would have been thought of as a mediocre quarterback. I think he's totally a product of a brilliant system, and he was specifically selected for fitting into that system. Roger Craig's numbers are a function of brilliance of that system. Would he have been that kind of quarterback in a conventional offense? I have no idea, nor does anyone else. So I'm much more, I'd spend my time looking for the next Bill Walsh, that's where I would spend a lot of time and energy. Sure.
I have a long running debate with a friend of mine about clutch versus non-clutch, unclutch. I don't know what's the proper term. But where do you stand on, knowing that, or based on your theory that quarterbacks in the 90th percentile are statistically insignificant, where do you stand on the clutch versus unclutch debate?
Well, so some of the things I am interested in a quarterback are, it's clear that there are advantages, particularly in critical situations, to quarterbacks who are prepared in a better than average way, right? So part of what we're talking about when we talk about someone who fails in the clutch is that they're in a situation that they simply haven't done the necessary level of preparation to deal with it effectively. So preparation is a function of, obviously, the quality of the coaching staff, but clearly the motivation level and willingness to learn of the quarterback. So I am interested in that fact. But paradoxically, that fact, not paradox at all, actually, non-paradoxically, that makes me even more excited about quarterbacks taken in the bottom of the draft, because it strikes me that their motivational matrix is much more conducive to working hard than those taken at the top. The last thing I want is some guy who's been told he's the greatest since he was 12. Are you kidding me? I want some guy with a chip on my shoulder, chip on his shoulder. He's the guy who will stay up late studying and preparing properly, I think, then he's more likely to have that kind of, to be someone who would perform better in those sorts of high-stakes situations.
Peyton Manning, I'm sorry, quick follow-up. Peyton Manning is an interesting case study for me because he played at Tennessee, didn't win a championship. The year that he leaves, T. Martin wins a championship. And for years, he's been criticized for not being able to win the big game. And then all of a sudden, he wins the big game. So did he become clutch, or was it, was it never a situation of?
Well, he was, as I said, to me, there's a lot of treatment effect there. He has had the same offensive coordinator every single year he's been in the pros. He's had an insanely stable coaching staff in his time. That's one of the best run franchises in sports. He's had all of these incredible advantages that have allowed him to mature and grow as a quarterback. He is the equivalent of the kid who had a warm and supportive family, and he's just like, so. To me, that when I look at Peyton Manning, I think as much about the Colts as I do about him as an individual. And I say, my lesson is, boy, if you can build that kind of organization, you can get a lot out of people's talents. Yeah, sure.
So given that coaches can go from coach of the year to fired the next year, do you think that the talent is in the individual or the strength of the organization, if you will?
Another big question, yeah. So can we apply the same thinking to coaches? The only place where I'm inclined to be a little bit more of a believer, I believe in star coaches more than I believe in star players. Just because, particularly in football, where the coach has such a massively disproportionate effect and control over the team, he's so much more than a motivator. And it strikes me that cognitive advantages of the coaching, analytic advantages of the coaching level are considerable. But I'm happy to be convinced otherwise. If you come up with data that suggests that coaching variability is so great that maybe we ought to think about coaches in the same way we think about quarterbacks, I'll go along with it. But for the moment, I'm willing to think of coaches as in a separate category. But on all these things, my position on all sports matters is, if you can show me the data, I'll change my mind. Given this is not, we're not discussing matters of grave moral importance. Sure.
How does that extend? You keep coming back to the issue of students and how well you can predict their performance. How do you feel about standardized testing in schools?
How do I feel about standardized testing?
In schools. Do you think it has any validity?
Oh, well, I'm Canadian, and we don't do any standardized testing. I'm deeply suspicious of it, except as a very broad sorting mechanism. If you're trying to figure out, who ought to go to college and who ought to not go to college at all, it's useful. But if you're using it to distinguish among equally able students, it's absurd. These things are only useful at the 50th percent, around the 50th percentile. They don't have any, and the kind of mania and absurd attention that is attached, I'm told, to this number that you get in this country, as a Canadian, I just find, ridiculous. I applied to college. We mailed in a sheet of paper to the government, one sheet of paper, and it had all of the colleges in Ontario in a row, and you ranked them in order that you wanted to go to, and you just folded the paper over and that was it. My parents weren't even involved. I applied for college in a minute and a half. I'm fine.